as I've moved into industry with McKinsey, you're exposed to all sorts of parts of commerce from banking through to healthcare to packaged goods and what have you. And the one that kept drawing me back was healthcare. I fell in love with one of my clients, New York Blood Center, just before September 11th in the US. And it really made me realize the impact and the value that healthcare brings to the world. And I've always been looking for ways to use that background that I had that was somewhat unique to move things along. And having been in multinational companies, having started my own biotechs, having been in ASX listed companies before, what really appealed to me about HaemaLogiX was how incredibly sound the science and the clinical data was, and how far they had achieved in their programs and their progress to this date. And what a great opportunity it was to really help empower and enable the bringing of that technology to the next step. When I look at trying to evaluate the science and the clinical potential for something like HaemaLogiX drugs, the monoclonal antibody capimab, or some of the other programs, what I end up doing as an outsider myself is going to my network that knows more about these subjects than I do, and going to and looking at the people who are involved in the program and speaking with them. And when I see the levels of expertise, global expertise, around the development of antibodies, the development of CAR-T, and the bringing of drugs to market for specifically multiple myeloma. And I see that they have pretty much all these people with incredible knowledge and experience working, driving, believing in the programs based on the science and based on the clinical evidence already in hand. There's nothing to sort of refute almost. And for me, that's how I credential a company like HaemaLogiX, and that's why I joined it in the first place. In multiple myeloma, which is a major market, 25 to 30 billion a year sales, with global players like Johnson & Johnson and a whole host, BMS, being very involved in the space, you'd think that the market was quite crowded. And it is for the targets that they look at. The targets that are in play right now are CD38 and BCMA. That's how they reach the cells that are causing the cancer. We have our own target. The light chain antigens, the kappa light chain antigen and the lambda light chain antigen, that we think is an incredibly unique and capable for differentiating cancerous cells from healthy cells. And this is super important in terms of the safety and the efficacy of the antibodies and the drugs that we're developing here. So from the perspective of the target, there's nothing that competes or compares to HaemaLogiX. And so our job number one, is to demonstrate the importance and the value of that target within this space. The strategic priorities for HaemaLogiX are pretty clear. We have 2 clinical trials that are on the launch pad. One of them is the phase 2b trial for capimab, the monoclonal antibody. This has been designed by experts. We have spent all sorts of money preparing the drugs. We've spent all sorts of money preparing the studies, but we can't commence the trial until we do our capital raise. The second is the CAR-T trial that we have in conjunction with the Peter Mac Institute in Melbourne. This is an opportunity to see how that target that we're marketing and bringing to the attention of the multiple myeloma community can be addressed through the CAR-T technologies. These will give us incredible readouts around that key objective of validating the target that we have and demonstrating its merit from a clinical setting. As the results of that roll out, it creates the information that we need to have the conversations with the FDA to take the next step and prepare for that next step. From a strategic perspective, it really is about staying clear, executing, doing the protection that we need to do around the novelty of our target and the novelty of our assets in terms of IP, and making sure that these trials give us exactly the information we need to take the next step in our journey. Yeah, risk is what it's all about, right? I mean, not just HaemaLogiX, but for any company that's developing a drug, I typically think of it as there's a future out there. The size of that, the value of that company is not in the millions. It's in the billions probably if it's successful. If it's not successful, its value is roughly zero. So the question is, how do you, whatever that risk factor is, kind of determines what the value of the enterprise is at any one moment in time. So what we do is we chip away at risk in order to get to that higher valuation and really deliver it, obviously, to the end point, to the market. Clearly, the most important thing to do is have an awareness and try to knock off the big chunks of risk that as early as possible. But again, in some ways to the outside world or to the casual investor, those risk improvements, the eliminations of those risks can be quite subtle. So one of the jobs we have is really to demonstrate and be clear about where the risks are and also how we are removing them and the risk levels that we have removed. And one of the things that I was interested about in HaemaLogiX is that a lot of the scientific and clinical risk is far more progressed than the commercial risk. And for me, the commercial risk doesn't involve will the drug become sold, but is the industry that we're operating in aware? Is it understanding what we're doing? And is it valuing what we're doing? And I think that there's a real strong gap there. So one of the roles that I have in the course of the next year or two is to make sure that I close that gap and make sure that the industry and the parties that are going to be doing investments in this space understand the value of what we have and can see that this is something that they too want to participate in. Two lessons that I can really think of are important in this role. One is that science and clinical have to be there. And it's ultimately, there's not a lot you can do to manage that, at least me personally as a CEO of a company like this. I'm not going to be able to drive that. I have to be able to rely on experts to help de-risk some of those steps and make sure that they're as successful as possible. But fundamentally, we're governed by biology. We're governed by the gears of life. And if our products aren't going to work, no matter what we do elsewhere, they're just not going to. So what attracted me to HaemaLogiX was the fact that those were in place, that there was so much confidence in this, and that's part of the business, that I could focus on the areas where we could do a bit better. But those were the soft problems of gathering resources, of gathering the commercial and the business development capabilities into one place. That was a really important learning to me because I've been on the other side where the science is the obstruction and that you're stuck and you end up pivoting. This company, I don't think is going to pivot. This is going to be focused on multiple myeloma, focused on the light chain antigens, and we're going to take this right through to the end. The other factor that I think is my experience has brought in is the need to communicate and to talk to a wide variety of investors, business partners, researchers, clinicians, patients. The need for understanding and communication across the board in an organization like this is absolutely paramount. Yes, that's internal, but it's also external because we're working into an ecology that's fully existent without us. We need to show where we fit in that ecology and find our niche and demonstrate the value of it. Because ultimately, when we do that, we become part of it and we impact patients. And this work that's been done to this date to find this amazing opportunity comes to its full fruition. We're going to be going through a lot of changes in the next year or so at HaemaLogiX. The key number one role that I have and job I have is to raise capital so that we can initiate our clinical trial along with the Alfred in Melbourne. Once that ball starts rolling, we have milestones built into that trial study. So we don't have to wait a few years to get information out of it. We're going to be getting information out in midway points that are going to be essential to FDA meetings going forward, partnering meetings going forward. So what you're going to see is not only in that trial, but also the CAR T trial that's already funded at Peter Mac. There's going to be patients being exposed to our technologies, our drugs, and we're going to see the results of that. And when that happens, things change very quickly. What motivates me personally, day in, day out, and also at HaemaLogiX is the concept that life is short, that we have an opportunity to make the most of our time, that we have and that involves doing the things that we love to do, doing the things that we value. And I personally value the ability to use science, use engineering to better people's lives. And when I see things that don't work in the world, I like to try to fix them.